We almost had a nuclear war without even realizing it. When you think of the Cold War, what comes to mind? Tense standoffs, leaders with fingers on the button, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Berlin Wall. Those were the high-drama moments played out on the world stage where all of humanity held its breath. But the times we truly came closest to nuclear annihilation weren't always broadcast on the evening news. They weren't debated at the UN. They were hidden away in classified reports buried for decades under layers of official secrecy. These are the declassified stories of when a single terrifying mistake, a dropped tool, or a simple computer glitch almost ended the world. Officially, an accident involving a nuclear weapon is called a broken arrow. But these stories go beyond just accidents. They include terrifying close calls where the systems we built to protect us nearly led to our destruction. We were on the brink of nuclear war, and for the most part, we didn't even know it. The Goldsboro Incident, the bomb that almost was. Our first story begins in the cold, dark skies over North Carolina, just after midnight on January 24th, 1961. A B-52 bomber, call sign Keep 19, was on a routine patrol. This was Operation Chrome Dome, where a fleet of nuclear-armed bombers stayed in the air 24/7, ready for a Soviet attack. On board Keep 19 were 8 crewmen and 2 Mark 39 thermonuclear bombs. Each one packed a 3.8 megaton punch, more than 250 times more powerful than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. The flight should have been uneventful, but during refueling, the tanker crew spotted something horrifying. Fuel was pouring out of the B-52's right wing. The pilot, Major Walter Scott Tulloch, broke away trying to make an emergency landing. But it was too late. The plane had lost thousands of pounds of fuel in minutes, and it was becoming uncontrollable. At 9,000 feet, Major Tulloch gave the order to bail out. As the crew ejected into the freezing night, the massive bomber started to break apart. For anyone on the ground, it would have been a horrifying sight of red flashes and falling debris. As the plane disintegrated, its 2 multi-megaton hydrogen bombs tumbled out into the darkness. This is where a tragic accident almost became an apocalypse. The bombs had a complex series of arming steps, but the G-forces of the plane's breakup started mimicking the signals of an intentional drop. The first bomb fell away cleanly. Its parachute deployed, and it was later found hanging harmlessly in a tree, its safety mechanisms intact. But the second bomb had a much rougher ride. Its parachute failed. It plunged into a muddy tobacco field near the town of Faro at over 700 miles per hour, disintegrating on impact. When recovery teams arrived, they frantically searched the muck. They eventually found the bomb's arming switch, and the discovery sent a chill down every investigator's spine. According to a declassified report by Parker F. Jones, a supervisor of nuclear safety, the switch had moved to the armed position. Jones later wrote that of the multiple safety mechanisms on the bomb, all but one had activated. A single, simple, low-voltage switch was the only thing that stood between the entire eastern seaboard and a catastrophe. Had that one switch failed, a 3.8 megaton explosion would have vaporized everything for miles. The radioactive fallout would have drifted over Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City, rendering them uninhabitable. The military tried to recover every piece, but the bomb's uranium-containing tail was buried so deep it couldn't be retrieved. To this day, a piece of a hydrogen bomb lies buried in a North Carolina field. For years, the government insisted there was no danger, but a 2013 declassified report told the real story. It was a moment where, in Jones's stark words, one simple dynamo technology, low-voltage switch stood between the United States and a major catastrophe. A single switch. That's all that separated a quiet night in North Carolina from a radioactive wasteland. It was a terrifying lesson in how even our most complex fail-safes can fail. But as scary as that was, another incident, this one caused by a simple, clumsy mistake, would bring another state to the brink. The Damascus incident, the dropped wrench. Fast forward to September 18, 1980 in rural Arkansas. Buried beneath a farm near the small town of Damascus was Launch Complex 374-7, home to a Titan II ICBM. On top of that missile sat a 9-megaton W-53 warhead, the most powerful nuclear weapon ever deployed by the US, with 600 times the destructive force of the Hiroshima bomb. That evening, a team of young airmen was doing routine maintenance in the silo. The work was incredibly dangerous. The Titan II used hypergolic fuels, meaning they'd ignite the instant they touched. The men had to wear bulky protective suits on a narrow platform, hundreds of feet underground, right next to a fully fueled, city-destroying missile. One of them, 21-year-old airman David Powell, was tightening a pressure cap when the 3-foot-long wrench socket slipped from its ratchet. It fell, bounced off a thrust mount, and pierced the missile's pressurized fuel tank. Immediately, a jet of toxic, explosive fuel vapor screamed into the silo. Alarms blared as the men scrambled to evacuate. Above ground, the control center descended into chaos. They had a Class 4 leak, a nightmare scenario their manuals offered no clear solution for. The fear was that the fuel could ignite, causing a massive conventional explosion that would scatter radioactive material across Arkansas. But the even greater fear was that the force of that blast could trigger the warhead's own explosives, leading to a partial or even full nuclear detonation. For 8 agonizing hours, commanders and engineers debated what to do. Finally, a desperate decision was made: send a 2-man team back into the vapor-filled silo to try and turn on an exhaust fan. Just after 3 a.m., as Senior Airman David Livingston carried out the order, a spark ignited the fuel. The explosion was catastrophic. It blew the 740-ton silo door clean off, launching it hundreds of feet into the air. The entire missile was ejected like a fiery spear before its second stage exploded in a massive fireball. And the 9-megaton warhead? It was thrown into a ditch about 100 feet from the silo's gate. It was dented, but its safety features had held. There was no detonation and no leak of radioactive material, but the cost was still high. Senior Airman David Livingston was killed and 21 others were injured. It wasn't an enemy attack or a political miscalculation that brought Arkansas to the edge of ruin. It was a young man doing a dangerous job who simply dropped a wrench. Once again, the bomb's own safety features were the last line of defense. But these accidents, rooted in mechanical and human error, were at least tangible. You could see the leak, you could find the broken parts. What happens, though, when the threat is invisible? What happens when the machines designed to warn us of an attack are the very things that lie? The NORAD glitch, the war game that became real. Our next story takes us to the nerve center of America's nuclear defense, NORAD, deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. On the morning of November 9th, 1979, the Cold War was frosty and the mood was tense. Suddenly, the unthinkable happened. The screens at NORAD lit up, showing a full-scale Soviet missile attack. Not 1 or 2 missiles, but hundreds of them. A classic decapitation strike. And the warning wasn't just at NORAD, it flashed on screens at Strategic Air Command and the Pentagon. It looked real at every level. The US war machine roared to life. 10 interceptor jets scrambled into the air. Bomber crews sprinted to their B-52s and started the engines. The president's airborne command post, the Doomsday plane, took off, though without President Carter. At the highest levels, the world was ending. Zbigniew Brzezinski, Carter's national security advisor, got a call from his military aide. 250 Soviet missiles were inbound. A moment later, a second call confirmed it was worse. 2,200 missiles. Brzezinski knew he was just moments from having to wake the president and tell him they had less than 30 minutes to respond. He looked at his sleeping wife and decided not to wake her. He just sat there, waiting for the end of the world. But back at NORAD, some operators were skeptical. They scrambled to check the primary sensors. The satellites and radars. The data from the satellites showed nothing. The radars saw nothing. There were no missiles. For 6 terrifying minutes, the US had been on the verge of launching a nuclear counterattack based on a ghost. The alert was cancelled just minutes, maybe seconds, before Brzezinski would have woken the president. The cause was absurdly simple. A technician had accidentally loaded a training tape of a war game scenario into the live operational early warning system. A simple human error had sent a realistic simulation of World War III through the entire command structure, making it look indistinguishable from the real thing. A computer glitch is one thing. But what happens when there's no glitch at all? What if our own perfectly executed plans look so real they convince the other side that the war has already started? Able Archer, 83, The War Game. The Soviets thought was real. This brings us to November 1983, one of the most dangerous moments of the Cold War. NATO was conducting its annual command post exercise, Able Archer 83. It was designed to simulate a conflict escalating from conventional to nuclear war. But in 1983, the exercise was more realistic than ever before. It included new encrypted communication formats, periods of radio silence, and the participation of high-level government leaders. To NATO, it was just a drill. But to the Soviet Union, it looked terrifyingly real. Soviet intelligence, already paranoid after the downing of a Korean civilian airliner just weeks earlier, believed Able Archer might be a cover for a genuine first strike. Their own intelligence operation, codenamed RYAN, was on high alert, looking for exactly these signs. As the NATO exercise simulated a move to DEFCON 1, the Soviets reacted with genuine alarm. An emergency telegram went out to KGB agents, warning that NATO forces were on high alert. In East Germany and Poland, nuclear bombs were loaded onto aircraft and dozens of missiles were readied for launch. Soviet leaders believed a Western attack was imminent. Incredibly, US and NATO commanders were largely unaware of the panic they were causing. It wasn't until after the exercise ended on November 11th that the full picture began to emerge, thanks in part to information from a British double agent in the KGB, Oleg Gordievsky. He revealed just how close the Soviets had come to launching a preemptive strike based on a misinterpretation of the exercise. A US intelligence officer, Lieutenant General Leonard Perutz, also played a key role by choosing not to escalate in response to the unusual Soviet military activity he observed, a decision later praised as fortuitous. A single switch that refused to fail, a dropped wrench, a computer tape in the wrong machine, and a war game that was a little too realistic. These declassified stories are united by a terrifying theme. The moments that brought us closest to Armageddon didn't always come from a grand chess match between superpowers. They came from the hidden corners of our own systems, from human fallibility, technological glitches, and sheer dumb luck. These incidents reveal a disquieting truth. We've been living on a knife's edge, protected not just by safeguards, but by the quick thinking of a few individuals and a healthy dose of fortune. These are just a few of the stories that have been made public. It makes you wonder how many other broken arrows remain hidden in classified files. The threat hasn't disappeared, it's just changed its face. The arsenals are still here and human fallibility is a constant. Have we truly mastered the terrifying technology we've created, or have we just been incredibly lucky? If you found this look into our hidden history compelling, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss more stories from our channel. And let us know in the comments. Which of these incidents do you find the most frightening? The mechanical failure, the human error, the computer glitch, or the terrifying misunderstanding?